Doamnelor și domnilor, bună ziua! Sunt Octavian Bratosin și vă invit la un nou interviu marca IPN. În contextul Zilei Mondiale a Asistenței Umanitare, vorbim despre oamenii care au nevoie de sprijin atunci când trec prin cele mai dificile momente. În Republica Moldova, Fondul ONU pentru Populație, UNFPA, este implicat inclusiv în protejarea femeilor, fetelor și a refugiaților din Ucraina. Despre această activitate, dar și despre provocările demografice ale țării, discutăm cu doamna Karina Nersesyan, reprezentanta de țară a UNFPA în Republica Moldova. Bine ați venit și vă mulțumesc că ați acceptat invitația IPN.
Thank you for having me.
As we look at UNFPA's work in Moldova in 2026, what are the most pressing challenges you are currently addressing, and where do you feel your intervention is making the greatest difference?
Well, first of all, we're talking on the World Humanitarian Day, and so please allow me to start by citing the words of my executive director that said, every day we witness the courage. Every day we witness millions of pregnant women that are working to protect a new life. And I think in that regard, as the representative of UNFPA in Moldova, our focus has been from the beginning of the war in Ukraine in 2022 and through now to continue supporting the government where the humanitarian crisis has now not disappeared but remains, except it faced how it looks. And we continue to adapt with the new look of it. So for us, this day is also a good point to remember that childbirth, that women's rights, do not stop with emergencies. They remain very, very pertinent, and women and girls need to have the opportunity to live in a safe environment, to mobilize their fertility aspirations, and to really be able to protect their health, but also that of their children. So you have also asked what would be the main interventions that Moldova, that UNFPA in Moldova supported, and beyond humanitarian response, which is where I started, granted the day, UNFPA Moldova, which just celebrated its 30th birthday in Moldova last year, has focused on supporting the national reform process through strengthening demographic resilience of the country. Demographic resilience effectively means that the country is able to adapt to the changing demographic situation as it arises, and of course continuing on its prime mission of preventing gender-based violence, as well as sexual and reproductive health strengthening in Moldova.
You mentioned earlier the World Humanitarian Day, which is above all about people who need support in times of crisis. And the Republic of Moldova continues to host refugees from Ukraine. What are the most pressing needs of Ukrainian refugees today, and how has the nature of humanitarian support changed compared to the first years of the war?
Indeed, the needs and the reality of the situation in Moldova has changed dramatically. In 2022, when at the outset of the war, the efforts were to receive, to protect, to give immediate assistance. We're now in 2026. Unfortunately, the situation in Ukraine, the war in Ukraine continues unabated. But the response on this side shifted from seeing over 1 million refugees passing through Moldova to now having about 140,000 refugees residing in Moldova, which means they need the level of protection, the level of stability, and the conditions that would allow for their human rights to be protected and the dignity of their presence in Moldova be upheld. So I would like to really commend the government how they were able to take the humanitarian efforts and translate them with the support of their partners, including that of UNFPA, translate them from emergency response into strengthening national systems. So the response has benefited not just the refugees, but the host population at large. And so, for example, UNFPA has equipped 12 maternity hospitals in Moldova, but those are part of the national health system, and so the hospitals remain. And throughout our conversation, I would keep coming back to the same point. The emergency interventions evolved into system strengthening so that the systems are prepared and able to respond should future crises hit, or to continue supporting the existing refugees and the incoming people on the move into Moldova.
Since the beginning of the war, UNFPA has helped build a network of safe spaces in Moldova, while also strengthening the systems and services behind them. What has this response achieved so far? How is the network evolving? And what will the additional funding from the United Kingdom announced this spring allow UNFPA to do next?
Perhaps let me unpack what a safe space means for your listeners, but also to help understand the importance of what a safe space is about. And so this is a space where women, whether from host communities or refugees, come to find exactly what the name says, a safe space, a space where they come battered by gender-based violence, and they receive legal help, they receive psychosocial support, they receive services that they need, including referrals that they would take to really protect themselves and their children. Again and again, I would be repeating the same thing. Everything we do is eventually feeding into the national structures. So the importance of the refrain that I put to you is the fact that it is not just a one-off intervention. It is an intervention that fits into a system that will remain long after the funding is gone. Perhaps UN agencies at some point exit, but the systems stay for the government to continue operating them. And this is exactly what the most recently announced UK government funding allows us to do. It allows us to ensure continuity of services, not just the safe spaces that are being gradually transferred to the government, but also to ensure training of frontline workers, building interoperability services between the institutions responsible for different aspects of gender-based violence, be it a police, being a medical service, be it perhaps a Ministry of Labor and Social Protection, so that ring of support exists, is well trained and able to respond as necessary to each and every survivor.
If we are looking beyond the humanitarian response, the Republic of Moldova is facing major demographic challenges. The population decline, also the migration and the aging and the low birth rate. At the same time, UNFPA research shows that many young people do want to have children, but face financial insecurity, difficulties accessing houses, and also child care. What needs to change in Moldova to help people turn their desire to have children into reality?
Yeah, I come from the agency that bases its interventions and programs on data. And that's what we promote with our partners, and that's what the key role of ours with the government as well. Now, let me start with perhaps a statement in that in Moldova, there is no shortage of desire to have children. We have conducted a gender and generation survey, 2 sets of it, 2021, 2024. And then most recently came the Youth Aspirations Survey. Both surveys state that the desired fertility, which is the number of children I would like to have, is 2.7. But the real fertility is 1.7. So there is somewhere in my desire and the reality in which I live, there is somewhere in there a child, pretty much. But notably, and that's what we have been working with the government, but also with our partners, the youth also tells us what is it that prevents them from achieving the so-called desired fertility. And youth is looking for stable income, but also they're looking for housing, family-friendly policies, which means having a child is not a crime and you will not be fired tomorrow for getting pregnant. And other, again, like a set of policies that together create a foundation in which the flower of desired fertility can bloom. Let me give you the data again. In 3 years, we have been working with the government on family-friendly policies. We have also involved private sector partners, a few largest companies in Moldova, also with the educational sector. We saw an increase of 14 percentage points of women returning back to work after maternity leave. So just think about it. In practical terms, it's about 200,000 people coming back. So here is the time when we speak about strengthening human capital, where every component of it, whether it's youth that only thinks of creating a family, whether it's women that are thinking second, third child, or maybe it's the fathers that are not sure whether they can afford. All these components of strengthening human capital through family-friendly policies and other interventions of supportive policy environment is the response to the issue that you have identified in your question.
Mrs. Nersesyan, the government has recently approved the National Disaster Risk Reduction Program. How can UNFPA support the government in making disaster preparedness and response more gender responsive while ensuring that women, girls, and other vulnerable groups can continue to access essential health and protection services?
So there are 2 programs in effect. The one you're referring to is the most recent program adopted in August, I think very recently. We're still in August. The other one was adopted in March on National Civil Protection Development Program. And so then that is followed with the National Disaster Risk Reduction Programs, and the 2 very much are interconnected. And again, that shows what we have been discussing throughout this conversation, that Moldova is positioning itself not just a responder. Something happens and a response comes, but a country that stands prepared should anything happen. And anything can, range, right? Winter is coming. Winterization needs are big. Vulnerable population may be impacted. Refugees, talking on it on the humanitarian day. What happens there? So there is a plan that is playing throughout to ensure that most vulnerable segments, especially women and girls, aged population, are not disproportionately impacted. And from the aspect of our mandate, UNFPA mandate, is that the reproductive rights and choices of women are fully protected and ensured as part of preparedness for the crisis.
Looking at the UNFPA's work in Moldova so far in 2026, what would you consider the organization's most important achievements, and what objectives remain particularly challenging?
We have discussed, and I've tried to kind of position it beyond just the interventions to say what we do is part of something bigger. So where we work and our interventions become parts of policies or programs, including the one we just discussed on disaster risk preparedness and others, that remain. It is the aspect of sustainability that I, as the representative of UNFPA Moldova, feel is one of our most important achievements, in that we contribute to the bright future of this country, that the seeds we put remain and keep blossoming, just like the beautiful trees on Ștefan cel Mare. Someone must have planted them sometime well before we were born. And now we enjoy the shade. So that's the same for us. And so beyond the humanitarian work that we have discussed, let me also highlight the UNFPA work in modernizing cervical cancer prevention. Just today there was an announcement somewhere in the media that now cervical cancer notifications go out automated. And that is the system that UNFPA Moldova built and transferred to the cervical cancer unit under the Mother and Child Institute. Now, the unfortunate statistics is the fact that in Moldova, there is very high incidence of deaths from cervical cancer. But then the brighter side of it, the cervical cancer is the only preventable cancer. So how come we cannot catch women at an early point where going for a checkup saves lives? I really hope that through the audience that you have, I put that plea, and the system is there, and now there are reminders talking about an achievement. Another point is in 2024, we had census in Moldova supported by UNFPA that produced a large volume of data. Now, UNFPA has been working with the partners to transfer that data into information that feeds into decisions. So it's not just numbers you look at and fall asleep. Those are numbers that tell you how much of which services would you need to have where, and the government is increasingly interested and very much eager to incorporate it as part of what we do together. Now, I think in terms of challenges, I would say, first and foremost, of course, the funding for humanitarian support is draining, but the needs are not slowing. And that feeds both the response to the refugee needs, but also response to preparedness, because the two is the same, two sides of the same coin. That is a challenge. So is the need to do more with less. And I think all I can say here is that we work to start from the basis of the policies and then work with our partners to lift it to the implementation level. So the, unfortunately, divide that happens sometimes between the wonderful policies and the implementation that is not there yet are bridged for the benefits of the population that we target.
UNFPA is increasingly working not only with public authorities, but also with the private sector and local communities, including on family-friendly workplace policies, reproductive health, as you said, and the well-being of employees. How important is this broader partnership approach for Moldova's future, and what concrete changes would you like to see over the next 2 or 3 years, let's say?
You know, I started from saying that we have increasingly graduated from implementing interventions into feeding it into a larger space that allows for sustainability. Now, if we look into that space, there isn't a single actor. Right now, with the speed of national reform, there is a need for everyone to come to the table and work together. And so UNFPA has been at the forefront of being part of the wider dialogues where, let me give you an example. UNFPA is a signatory to the last year launched initiative of Moldova AI Hub. It is, at least in its current format, and it may be changing soon to elevate the status, but it was launched under the Ministry of Economy and Digitalization. But there are 13 signatories to the AI Hub, of which one is UNFPA. You would, of course, think of Moldcell and Orange, which is almost mandatory, right? But there is also AmCham. There is also medical university. So there are partners that wouldn't normally be at the table. And this is one example of how bringing this diversity of presence is making a difference. For AI, yes, drive economic growth, and yes, understand the social aspects of where AI can be force for good, not just economically, but also socially. And another example is where we are connecting the newly evolving phenomenon of technology-facilitated violence with the national system of VO data currently under procurement, where the online violence becomes part of the national recognized system that captures it early, before a woman finds herself in a dark space of the web.
And finally, looking toward 2027 and beyond, what are the priorities that UNFPA Moldova simply cannot afford to lose sight of?
I think it's the side of the human capital. Very often, in the process of reform, in the process of moving forward with speed, the human side, the side of what we call, and I repeated the term, of human capital, is not necessarily captured because of the rush to implement, and quite successfully. However, vulnerable women, girls, older population, that is becoming increasingly a reality here, is part of the future. They can contribute and are already contributing to the future. And I think, to me, it's important that the new systems that are building, that UNFPA is supporting, are standing strong while also preserving the system readiness to accommodate those most vulnerable and be ready for potential shocks. I would say, to close the response, UNFPA has been recognized for the work that it has done in terms of translating its interventions into sustainable systems by most recently concluded UNFPA global evaluation, by the humanitarian program evaluation, again done by the independent evaluation office of UNFPA, and most recently again upheld in the upcoming release of the UNFPA country program evaluation, where the same recognition of our ability to translate interventions into a space for sustainability and wider policy reform has been recognized.
Doamna Nersesyan, vă mulțumesc foarte mult pentru această discuție și pentru munca pe care UNFPA Moldova o desfășoară în sprijinul oamenilor aflați în situații vulnerabile. În contextul Zilei Mondiale a Asistenței Umanitare, mesajul este simplu: în spatele fiecărei statistici se află un om care are nevoie de protecție, de sănătate și de șansa de a-și construi un viitor. Vă mulțumesc!